Shall we log in?
Whenever
Yeah,
you
I
want.
think we should go live.
Yes.
We are live now.
All right. So, namaste, Dr. Dror, and welcome to the InspireX conversations. As you know, the format for the first 45 minutes or so, you would be having a conversation with our co founder and host, Itu Chopra, and then I'll join you in the last 10 to 15 minutes to provoke some insights which would benefit people who are watching us and several people watching us on Facebook Live. So, welcome once again, and over to you, Itu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jerry. Namaste once again, Dr. Dror. How are you?
I'm fine,
And
thank
welcome to the Rex Inspire Experience. We call it Inspire Experience on Mondays, where we try and get inspiration that is from all around the world with RX Karamveer fellows like you. And you're sitting in Geneva right now. And what one thing has made possible is that virtual connection is on, no matter the world is shut in a lot of ways. So with I'm not going to delve into introductions and things like that, and I think I'm going to dive straight away into questions and conversation with you, and I think through that we will come to know a lot and learn a lot with you from your exceptionally brilliant career and learning from the vast array of work that you have been doing in microinsurance and a lot of other areas that we begin with. But to begin with, I'm going to speak about the fact that you're multilingual, very, very extensively traveled to 75 countries, and you've stayed for about 7, 8 years in India. Tell me about all of this, and tell me about how was your stay in India, and did you manage to pick up Hindi?
So, namaste to you and to all the listeners. Thank you for inviting me for this talk. Thank you, electronics, for allowing us to see each other and not just to hear each other.
Sure.
And let me delve into your question. You mentioned that I traveled. Yes, I did travel. I've traveled in actually 98 countries. I've
Okay.
worked for one of the striking lessons of this experience, which obviously is lifelong, has been that with my meager 4 languages, actually 5, in most places in the world, I was unable to communicate in the local language. So if for some people, knowledge of 4 or 5 languages seems impressive,
Yeah.
these, in terms of languages, exceed the number of countries. Think of
True.
India. How many languages does one need to manage in India? So you asked me whether I've been able to pick up Hindi.
Any Hindi, I mean,
So maybe I should tell you that when we started working, we first worked in Kalahandi, which is Odisha.
right.
Hindi doesn't go very far in Odisha. You need to know the local language.
Yeah.
Odishi.
Yeah.
Also worked in Warangal, which was then AP, which is now Telangana.
Yes.
They don't believe much in Hindi, certainly not the Hindi that is spoken in New Delhi.
True.
In Churu, Junjunu, Hanumangar, in
Yes.
Rajasthan on the frontier, almost the frontier with Pakistan,
Right.
own language. We also worked, yes, when we started working in Bihar, in Vaishali district and others, and when we worked in Kanpur Dehat or Pratapgarh in UP, Hindi became more useful. But then again, they speak Hindi differently, or at least they believe that they speak the correct Hindi. So it's not the same Hindi everywhere.
Right.
We worked in Bid district in Maharashtra. That's not a place where Hindi goes a very long way.
It isn't.
We worked in Rajnagaon district in Chhattisgarh. We worked in Banke and in Dading in Nepal. We helped the Tibetan central administration create their social security. So only from that list, which is a partial list of work in the Indian subcontinent, you
Yes.
realize there isn't any one language, maybe
True.
with the exception of English, that actually could help us communicate. So, no, I am not fluent in Hindi. I've been able to manage my life. I lived in Delhi for close to a decade, and
Yes.
managed, and I've learned a lot of things. I've learned, for instance, that if you have domestic help, even those who claim that they can read and write, they teach you how people who are illiterate manage. They teach you that there are many things that have to be relegated to memory because you can't leave a note and
True.
it will happen. So if you
True.
want vegetables to be bought or if you want things to be done, memory, human memory, becomes an incredibly important tool. So I've learned other things in Delhi, which were not only Hindi, and
Yeah.
seem to have become very useful not only in India but also elsewhere.
Right.
How do we manage in terms of MIA, the Micro Insurance Academy?
Yes.
The way we manage the linguistic issue
Mm.
is certainly not purely only linguistic. It is also sometimes cultural.
Absolutely.
Has been that we always hired people
Mm.
who spoke the local language and, as if only possible, who came from the same region, because
Right.
the communication, apart from the verbal communication,
Right.
gestural comments, and other elements, and people felt a lot more comfortable talking to their own than talking to somebody else.
True.
The other thing is that within the team, people came from different backgrounds. So not
Right.
everybody was Hindi mother tongue.
Right.
Some came from Kerala. They wouldn't go
Right.
very far with their Malayalam in the team, nor did
Right.
they use it for work because we didn't work in Kerala. So, to make a long story short, we needed a common language, which was English, but
Right.
we also needed a common language in each and every location we worked. And it could not be anything but the local dialect.
True.
So, um, of course, my role as chairman of MIA was to be in constant contact with government officials, officials from other places, academics, and donors. And the language in those encounters was invariably English.
True.
French,
True.
German, or Spanish, or anything else would not have gone very far, and
Yeah.
nor would actually even Asian languages. So,
Yeah.
as it turned out, even though I do know 4 languages, I used mainly one, or 5 languages. I know I used only one. And in reality, even if I knew Hindi perfectly fluently, which I don't, I can assure you that nobody in a village would have ever considered me local because of my knowledge of Hindi. I would have remained the foreigner that I am.
Yeah, my, that part of my question was in the lighter tone, in the lighter vein, to just bring out so much learning that you brought, because you've been to places in India where most Indians haven't been. Some of them probably would not know these places existed, like the Junjunu, or the Churu district of Rajasthan. I know that I've been there because of the grassroots work, and also my husband was in the army, so army throws you at places where no one has been. So you have so extensively traveled within the country, because your work and the nature of the work that you were doing in microinsurance required you to reach out to the grassroots, bottom of the pyramid people, to be able to help them. So that's a very, very beautiful revelation. But yes, about Hindi was on in an absolutely lighter tone that I wanted to ask you.
When I came to Delhi to
Right.
launch the Micro Insurance Academy,
Yeah.
um, I was not new to India. It was not my first encounter with India. I don't know how things would have gone had it been the first encounter. I was
Right.
in India first very briefly in the early 80s, but I came to India for about 6 weeks in 1987.
Right.
1987, most of the people I interacted with could hardly remember those days. So it wasn't that long ago for me, but it is very long ago for very many people, because when you think what the average age in India is, you realize that for most people, this is before their time.
Okay.
And at great length, 6 weeks, I did like the pilgrimage route in the south. I then came 2 years later and spent 2 months and did different routes in the center and in the north. And I've been in India on other occasions where I had some ILO business. So many of the encounters that you encounter when you come as a tourist,
Right.
you're exposed to a different behavior and a different context, taught me a lot about the mindset and the experiences of what India really is and what I might be able to expect. But of course, other than the things that are difficult for foreigners to first comprehend and then express,
True.
I also learned what I intuitively thought I knew, but I saw it. I saw it in real life. The vitality, the vital role of the community.
Right.
Affiliation is a huge thing in India, an absolutely indispensable thing. Everybody essentially is affiliated to a community. It starts from the family, the extended family, the friends, the neighbors, the location, the village, and lots of other elements that are absolutely dominant and decide or intervene in virtually every phase of your life. How you spend money, whom you're kind to, whom you emphasize the differences, etc. And this was a learning curve. Not to understand that would have been a handicap in understanding how we can leverage the knowledge and the wisdom and
Right.
the power of communities well beyond indigenous languages.
Yeah. So that's a boon and a bane in India, both ways. The community strength, the diversity in community strength. It's a boon and a bane. And I guess the area of work that you were doing, you felt that it was a great cohesive power that kept people together, and also bring brought people apart in their mindset and thoughts. But I'm going to move to the part of your life when you came to Delhi, your tenure in Delhi, and you founded the Academy for Technical Advisory in Microinsurance to Grassroots Groups. Tell us about that work and tell us a little more about your tenure and microinsurance part of it.
So maybe I need to clarify terminology first. When we
Please
talk
do.
about, when we talk about chapati, everybody understands that we are talking about some kind of an unleavened flatbread. We all know that it is a form of bread which is typical for the Indian subcontinent. And whether you hear chapati in East Africa or in the Caribbean, or of course in India, you know what we're talking about. Everybody has a universe of discourse. We have a common language around that.
Right.
We don't have a universe of discourse about what the meaning of micro insurance is. So we first of all need to establish what are we talking about when we say microinsurance.
Right.
I was the first to actually introduce this term to the literature in a paper I published in 1999. Nobody ever used the term microinsurance before that. It took on like wildfire. If I had at the time procured the intellectual property which was mine, maybe the course of history would have been different. Who knows?
Who knows?
And turned out that what I referred to when I use that term is not what others find useful in expressing in microinsurance. And so we are talking about different things with the same term. What do I refer to? When I wrote that paper in 1999, I refer to decisions about buying insurance that are taken at the grassroots level. Now, most people do not buy insurance. Most people buy or spend money on other ways of procuring some kind of security.
True.
Some of them do it through finances, some of them do it in other ways. But the point was that many of those financial decisions, which procure some safety to the family, to the community, to the village, are all taken at local level, the household level, the extended family level, the community level, the level where people can get help if they are in difficult situations. So when I refer to micro insurance, I did not refer to this industry which has a very bad reputation, insurance, and I simply said, let's maybe do something small. I referred to the level of society where decisions are taken. So micro is reference to decisions taken at grassroots level. Compare that to meso, which are decisions taken at, let's say, district or state level, or macro, which are taken at country-wide level.
Right.
So, what do other people think about this? Some people, when they talk about microinsurance, refer to insurance for the poor. What I mean there is they focus on the target population, the poor. So they say microinsurance is insurance for the poor. The emphasis is the poor, not insurance. Others, like IRDA, say microinsurance is low-cost insurance. The focus is on the product, not on the client, not on the decision. It's the same company, it's the same business, except make it cheap. Now, when you make something cheap, you know that you also cut the coverage or the quality of the coverage. So essentially, this is low-cost product, which may be not even worth the money you are spending because the coverage you will get is so bad that it should not be bought, because there is a certain trade-off between these two things. The third option was for people to use microinsurance by saying, look, insurance is a very complicated thing. Nobody understands it, and there is always this fine print where they trap. So let's do something that is simple to understand, straightforward. Let's call it microinsurance. And some, as you mentioned in our previous conversation, consider it as a subgroup of microfinance. So the real question is, how do we develop a universe of discourse so that we actually all mean chapati and we know what we're talking about, except microinsurance?
Right.
So you could say, why was it even necessary to develop a new term, microinsurance?
Right.
Because most insurers, most of the industry does not know the needs and the priorities of people, and certainly not of people at the base of the pyramid. They don't spend the effort, the time, the money to actually find out what are the priorities. What do these people want? What do these people need? How much would they be willing to pay for? Under what conditions, etc. And most people have no idea what insurance is. So in fact, there is a double whammy of both parties to this transaction not really understanding the other party. Now, if this is the situation, why should there ever be a meeting on a successful transaction? Impossible. Impossible.
True.
Now, I thought of this microinsurance in that context. And so I've heard lots of people telling me all those strange and wonderful explanations of what microinsurance is, and I wanted to carry you through this. He said to me, well, when you say micro, you always say it's small, right? Well, think of Microsoft. Is that small? Not exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And yet, Microsoft. You might say it's simple. Micro means simple. Well, have you ever heard of microsurgery? It's everything other than uncomplicated surgery. It's complicated.
Yeah.
Have you thought of the option that it should be straightforward and clean and clear? Well, we all know the message of micromanagement. The negative connotation of micromanagement is that there's lack of freedom, lack of coherence, and all kinds of arbitrary intervention, which is not part of a normal, desirable contract. So all those interpretations of micro do not help us. We need to go back to something that is more coherent in the context of Social Security. That is the domain I've worked on. That is the domain I claim to know. And that's where I put in this term. So what I know all the reasons why most people need insurance.
Right.
People do not understand insurance, but I claim that I have the knowledge, and I'm not alone, of course, that insurance actually plays a very important role, particularly to people who cannot afford to weather a big risk. If you're very wealthy, even a big loss will not throw you off. The less wealthy you are, the more you need insurance to stabilize your income stream over fluctuations of exposure to risk. That is the logic. And there is a certain logic how it works better and how it is economically more viable. So in most countries, the state has taken over, has intervened in this domain, and has actually created a fantastic world for the insurance because it understood that most people need insurance. And it also understood that most people don't buy insurance because they don't really know what it is, but also because they do not trust the insurer to pay because they sell a promise.
Right.
And therefore people have a trust issue with the insurance companies. The paternal state took over, and the paternal state made it a mandating a requirement by law to be insured. In Western countries, India has tried to emulate some things from the Western countries, and not only India. In Western countries, everything of importance in your life is tied with an obligation of insurance. For instance, you want to live in a house because it's comfortable. It's not so nice to live under a tree. To buy a house, no matter how small, no matter how simple, you have to get credit. But that means that there will be at least two kinds of insurance. One on the house, should there be an earthquake, and one on your life, should you die and not be able to pay. Both of them expensive. They are necessary to guarantee the viability of the way of financing your home over 20, 30, 50 years. Otherwise, nobody would take that risk. But with insurance, it can be done, and everybody can afford it because the cost, even though higher, is spread over very many years.
Long time.
Job. So let's not just think of you want to live. You want a job, doesn't. If you want a job in the West, you look for pay, you look for content, you look for social status, you don't look for insurance. But the moment you get a job, you have 5 kinds of insurance locked into it. Unemployment insurance, old age pension, workman's compensation, and I don't recall now all the details, health insurance, and the 5th I can't remember right now, but it doesn't make a difference. So You didn't ask for the insurance. You asked for a
Right.
job. You
Right.
negotiate salary, not the deductions to the insurance, but it's part and parcel. You don't want the insurance, get out. You cannot have it in most civilized countries. The United
Right.
States is an exception, but even there it's somehow tied.
Right.
So you want a car, well, or a motorcycle. The moment you have a vehicle, even if this vehicle has never yet hit the road, you need insurance, at least third-party liability.
True.
And I could walk you through almost every important decision in life. There are insurance elements tied into it in the paternal state. But the paternal state
Mm.
is now risen and fallen. We are beyond the glorious times of the paternal state. Firstly, the Soviet model is dead and buried since 1991. That was also a model of a paternal state. And then there is the Western welfare state, which is being rolled back everywhere, even in Sweden, even in other countries that were supposedly the model. It's all being rolled back gradually, a bit more reasonably, but still, there is a great deal. And so the paternal state is no longer there. And in low-income countries, there never was a paternal state. You could not ever extend the protections. So if you don't have a paternal state, and you do not have a dialogue between the insurance companies who don't know the clients and the clients who don't trust the insurance companies, where do we go? We need a
Right.
different model. And this is
Right.
where I started thinking,
Mhm.
what is it in society in all countries that actually works well? The
Right.
family works well. The extended family works well. The community works well. If you live in a village, everybody knows you and everybody knows whom they trust and whom they don't. And what's the
Yeah.
degree of trust? And can they trust for everything, only for some things? It's a completely well-established system. Gossip is king. It's not all bad.
Yeah.
It's not all bad. It creates the dynamics through which people behave and through which the economy marches. And
True.
so I wanted to build on that. I said, communities have
Mm.
always worked. Even when the paternal state weakened them, it didn't kill that, because that is so deep an instinct that it works for everything else that the state did not interfere in. And
Right.
so I wanted to build something that is community-based, and within that community, the logic is to make it needs-based and demand-driven. Now, what does
Right.
that mean? Needs-based and demand-driven? It means that if I were to come to you, Mrs. Chopra, and tell you, I know better than you what your needs are, you would say, listen, you may have more education, you may be older, but with all due respect, my needs, I know best, and my priorities are mine, not for you to fix. You would not accept, and most people would not accept, a paternal external approach that should tell you how to put your priorities. That's exactly
Right.
how communities function as well. People negotiate, people argue, people agree, people get confused, people get convinced. But at the end, consensus is king.
Yeah.
Most people want to be part of the consensus, and that is a stronger wish than the wish to have a firm opinion. So
Right.
we see people developing consensus through dialogue. And
Right.
then the need of the community evolves. It may
Right.
not be the objectively best solution, but it still is a solution that for that community is the most appropriate at that point in time. And this is a dynamic one can strengthen. It's not all intuitive. Some things can be strengthened. Some things can be helped to be created. Some things require some technical knowledge. Some things require social dynamics and facilitation.
Right.
Yes, there's also a little bit of money, but the main issue is not money. The main issue is the dynamics. And this is what microinsurance is all about. It's not about the money. Yes, even when you say it's not about the money, you still need some money. That's true. Money is there to facilitate all kinds of things. But the main dynamic is not about the money. It's an error to think that it is really fundamentally about the money. It isn't. So it is much more akin to marriage than it is to banking. And this is why it's so easy to explain microinsurance to children in a rural village at the end of India than it is to a bureaucrat in Delhi on a hill. Because
Yeah.
every child understands the dynamics of society, of the parents, of the marriage, of who negotiates with whom, and all this.
Yeah.
Bureaucrats want to see how this can be applied to the entire country equally, because everybody is equal in front of the law. It doesn't work that way.
Work like that. Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Also, at the end of the day, it is empowering for the people at the grassroots level, because then they have some power over what they are dealing with.
It is not only at the end of the day, it is the beginning of everything. If people do not feel that this is a win-win, they don't get
Right.
into it. If
Absolutely.
this is a win-lose, even for a village chief, ultimately they will not go for it.
True.
They want a win-win. They're willing to bend over for a win-win. They're not willing to bend over for a win-lose. Win-lose is transactional. Win-win is situational, is emotional, and
Right.
feelings are very important. At the end of the day, if you wish, what really drives the entire endeavor, social endeavor of people, is how they feel about it.
Yeah.
They feel good about it. There is nothing they will not try and will not do. If they feel bad about it, you can be sure they will do their level worst. And you can't build a society on the efforts of level worst.
True.
Correct. So feelings are very, very important. And
Yeah.
there are some places where you can evoke that and people understand the value of supporting positivity,
True.
communal positivity around a theme, around a real topic.
Right.
Other places, no way. If all you want to talk about in the context of COVID,
Right.
epidemiology and viruses, you will never be able to understand why most people feel about it the way they do, both disgusted and fearful. But
Yeah.
these disgusted and fearful are not epidemiological terms. They are emotional terms.
Yeah.
And it so happens that this is how we are. We are emotional bipeds. The
True.
feelings make us go to the end of the world and make us refuse to walk one step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Dr. Dror, tell me that you worked in some of the poorest district of the country, or the districts that are farthest away from the developed cities, and taking this product. I don't know if I'm right to call it a product, uh, to the villages. How was your experience, and how how receptive were they? Because it was something new for even the grassroots or people or the community at that point of time. I mean, the model was different. Some or the other way, the model was being practiced at the village level or at the grassroots level. But I'm in particular talking about what you were trying to educate them about.
You know, we're not talking about a product, we're talking about a process.
Right.
And thank you for being so hesitant about product, because indeed it was not the right term. We're
Yes,
talking about,
that's why. Yes.
and I think I can help explain to you
Mm-hmm.
how it all worked at the community through two things which I think I quoted in my main book. It is the book.
Yeah.
And in the very beginning, there are two, I still, yes, I remember it correctly. Before one delves into the text, I gave two quotes, and they give the nutshell answer to your question. The The first quote is this: in order to change, we must be sick and tired of being sick and tired. There is no way I could go and tell people, listen, it is good for you to change. I could only work when people felt that the current situation in which they were was totally inadequate for them, not for me, not for the district collector. When they were sick and tired of being sick and tired, they wanted change. And they were willing to listen to anybody, even a Ferengi like me. Not
True.
before. The second quote was, if you think you're too small to be effective, you have never been in bed with a mosquito.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
Everybody
yes.
knows.
Everybody, in India, at least everybody knows.
Everybody knows everywhere. There is no such thing as we are so small, we are so weak, we are so poor, we are so uneducated. How can we do anything? The idea that I went to such people and told them, you can do it, you can do anything.
Right.
You feel you're too small, you've never been in bed with a mosquito. That echoed with them, that they actually have a great deal of knowledge, a great deal of social power, a great deal of determination with which they can do things, with which they can even ask for help. Now, I also had people who said to me, why don't you just pay for it? Don't ask us to do anything. Pay for it. You're rich, we're poor, no? I said, no, I am not as rich as to pay for you. For that, I need a different motivation. It's not interesting to pay for you. It's very interesting to try to help you do something that will survive my one-time donation.
True.
And that dynamic required a lot of dialogue and a lot of coming and going and supporting for months and sometimes for years, but gave results. So my short answer to you, I have not seen as much intellectual vigor and as much willingness to adapt and to change and develop solutions in any other place in India over and beyond the villages. The villages are, in my view, the most open and the most ready to develop solutions. Yes, they have been burned many a time. Yes, they've been cheated many a time. Yes, they have an incredible CV of bad experience.
True.
But they haven't lost their feelings and they haven't lost their intelligence. And they have to compensate with those two things for all kinds of other shortcomings, and they do it very well. So it's a huge, invigorating experience to actually go to villages and get somewhere, get into the dialogue. It's an incredibly enriching and empowering feeling, even if you just succeed to break through in the dialogue.
Yeah. And I think to that, I'd like to add that the grit and the resilience of the true, heart of the country, which lies in the villages. And that's where that also helps them. Another thing that, it echoes so much with the work and the kind of things that we do at Rex Karamveer is that, never underestimate the heroic potential in every person, no matter where they come from. Every ordinary human being has heroic potential, and that's the ethos and philosophy with which you went to help at the grassroots level. I'm going to come back to the fact that you have written enormous number of books and you have written huge number of papers. If I was to enumerate them, it's going to take me about 15-20 minutes to even enumerate them, maybe more. So and a lot of your journals and your research work has been around microfinance, about health, about microinsurance, And you've also served as honorary professor at Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Um, I'd like your insights on the fact that you're constantly learning, researching, thrashing ideas, sharing it to the world. What is the inspiration behind all of that? What keeps you going into writing so much and publishing your papers and journals, etc.?
Well, out of India, out of my decade in India, I published 98 peer-reviewed papers and 7 books.
Right.
It means that there is a huge story to tell from the experience of ordinary people who do extraordinary things. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about villagers. I'm talking about people in communities in very humble circumstances in the places
Right.
mentioned earlier on. So that in itself is an inspiring story. And inspiring stories want to be written,
True.
really want to be written. And they're
True.
interesting to read. So, but at a different level, at the more academic level, I would say that we really have here a conundrum that has never been fully worked out. The conundrum is this. We all believe, we all agree that human life is of paramount value.
True.
But we all also agree that it has a price. Now, the price changes in location, in context, but there is a price to it. It's not priceless, much as one would like sometimes to say it, but it's really not the case. Why do I say that? Look at the world. The vast majority of people in this world do not have affordable access to healthcare. So,
Right.
if life is the primary thing, how is it that governments, that families, that the business world, that the communities don't pay anything, everything to secure access to health for everybody?
Right.
Work that way. Now, when I say the majority of people do not have access to care, India is a case in point. Nepal is a case in point. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, South Asia, but also most countries in Africa
Right.
and a lot of other number of countries where this is an unresolved problem. The countries where there is a solution are really the minority, not the majority.
True.
And the model that the countries that have it developed or rely upon is essentially geared on 2 strategies: mandating and subsidization.
Right.
Mandating means the government uses the authority of the state to oblige people to do something they would not otherwise do by telling them, you must have health insurance. In
Right.
India, this mandating does not exist, but
Mm.
in Switzerland and in Germany and in France and in a number of other countries, this is the law. And whether you're a student or an employee or self-employed, poor or rich, you must be in a health insurance. You must be.
Right.
So in countries that can apply mandating, this can work. There may also be some fringes that for some reason are not in, but basically most people are in. But for that, you need to know who all your citizens are, where they live, when were they born, what do they earn, and how can I tax them for this if they do not do it? How can I penalize them if they do not apply the law? In India, the government, for love or money, doesn't know who their citizens are, where they live, what they earn, how much can they pay, what is their cost. No way.
No way.
Now, the logistics of mandating is inoperable.
Absolutely.
The other strategy is subsidization. Subsidization means that the government takes money from one group of people and gives it to another group of people. The government per se does not make any money, does not create any money. It redistributes money from people who pay to people who do not pay or who even get something. Now, this can work when most people are in the tax system and most people contribute into the tax system enough so that redistribution is possible.
Right.
And take the case of India, most people, the vast majority of people, are not at all in the tax system. And the tax compliance in India is estimated at 3% of the 100% that would be required. So most people who are supposed to pay taxes do not pay it either legally or illegally, which means there's very little to redistribute. So if mandating and subsidization, those two principles, two strategies, cannot be applied, how do we do health insurance for everybody?
Yeah.
This is the intellectual issue that I wanted to tackle. And I can tell you, with all my books and all my papers, there is still more to say. There is lots more.
Yeah, I think you must keep talking about it. And, as a senior specialist at ILO and, for health and social protection with the World Bank, with ADB, you worked in third world countries and, Southeast Asia, Africa, and the government and the NGOs, donors, whole lot of grassroots level people. Share with us the really, is it a progressive way or is it regressing in the context of, does it really, really helps the people at the bottom of the pyramid? Because, I just said that, I somewhere don't agree with you that life is priceless. In India, it is, life has no price. Very, very sadly, some of the life has no price. People don't even wink an eye. And in that context, did it really, really help? Because you worked with World Bank, you worked with ADP, and at the micro level and at the bottom of the pyramid. So did it really help to progress, or are we still in that regressive state?
So this is, of course, a rather strong question, and I have to be a bit moderate in my answer.
Okay.
I think that when I can say with perfect honesty that when I worked in the international organization, in the multilateral organization, I felt a tremendous distance between myself and everything real. The real world was as far as East is from West. We lived in a bubble.
True.
On one hand, we lived in comfortable settings, and I don't bemoan them. And in addition, I had diplomatic rights, so my comfort was as best as it gets in the system, and I can assure you it is quite comfortable. On the other hand, we were dealing with eradicating poverty, eradicating hunger, not helping reduce it a little. Eradicate. Nothing was less than total solutions, which of course are unreachable. So very often I felt a tremendous distance between myself and everything real. And this is maybe unavoidable, maybe not. But this, I think, is not a unique feeling of myself only. I think that quite a lot of people, unfortunately, can't avoid becoming a little numb to all these huge declarations on things that they talk about all the time, they eke a living out of, but can't really do much about. The other thing is, I know very few people, not only in India, but also in the UN system, who would have taken the trouble and the risk and the uncomfortable situations to actually go to villages.
Right.
When we talked about in the World Bank and in ILO and in other places, when we talked about going to the field was a five-star hotel in Delhi. It was not overnight in Churu or in Vaishali or in Malkangiri
Right.
that most people go to because they're afraid of the Naxalites.
Right.
It's a different world. So
Yeah.
when I started, and before that, when I worked in Uganda and in South Africa and in the Philippines,
Right.
or India, I realized the enormous change that actually is exemplified by walking. If you do not have a vehicle, if you walk the world, a mile becomes a long distance.
Right.
10 miles is a real trek. 50
Right.
miles is hardly possible. The world
Yeah.
all of a sudden gets a different dimension when you go down to that level. See what I mean by this?
Yeah.
Here, when you went to the village level, where you had to,
Right.
you could only make any headway if people began to develop a relationship of trust to you, the foreigner, which they're so used to not trusting.
Right.
Then only did you realize what a huge distance 1 mile is. And you need to walk 10,000.
Right.
So it's a huge effort. To actually work the real ground is a huge, huge effort. I'm not even talking about the donors to get money for this work, which many think is naive or impossible, or maybe not so in the priority list of this specific donor who wants to deal only with 3 topics and that's it.
Right.
The effort to actually get something done, you cannot imagine that effort while you're still in a job in the international agency. Not possible. You're disconnected. And the connect,
Yeah.
and even in Delhi, most of the people I met in Delhi, officials and in business and in the diplomatic community and whatnot, were totally disconnected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally disconnected from that reality. So
Yeah.
this is a very important aspect of trying to somehow bridge this thing. Now, if this work is done, this is not an eyewash. This is real work. Will that mean that we are convincing the powers that be? That is a very difficult question. You know, the world, since the political support of President Reagan and Prime Minister Thatcher, which considered profit to be the only thing that matters, and Margaret Thatcher, who said, there is no such thing as society. That's a quote. There
Right.
is no such thing as society. Well, to those I say, yes, there is such a thing as society. In fact, there is nothing that can build in a country without a society first. And that was a very tough struggle to, at all levels, international, national, local, to actually get that message out. There is a new book that was published just this year by 2 people I appreciate greatly, Paul Collier and Mr. Kay, which is called Greed is Dead. I highly recommend that everybody that listens to this should read it. Maybe greed is not entirely dead, but it's certainly on the wane. It's certainly a new look. And it's not only because of COVID, there is a new look. The world in which financial results were the only thing that mattered, that world is changing. And in my view, it's changing for the better. The days when companies were told that they are too big to fail, and yet they failed. And who paid? Not the companies, not the super rich organizations. Everybody, taxpayers paid. Those days are on the wane, if they're not totally over. Today, the key issue is, how do we mobilize and build and support and facilitate strength of the small. Small is beautiful. Small is powerful. And when you aggregate small, you've got it all. You've got all the big. You can't do that top down. It is all a matter of bottom up. It's all a matter of allowing people to design their lives according to what they believe is their priority, their need, their demand, and their means. They're not asking for a handout, but they're asking to do it in their own way. And even if they're not asking, that's what they do. So in a way, maybe my idea has been a little bit ahead of its time, because if I had thought about it earlier, maybe I would have started 20 years even earlier.
Right.
I think we are now getting to the time where the international communities pay attention to what happens at grassroots much more, and grassroots pay attention to what they think and want and do much more than in the past. They no longer think that the government will fix it all, even if they still have the habit of asking. But I have experienced that in most places at grassroots level, the government is part of the problem. Unless it gives something, we don't want to deal with them. They're more a problem than a solution. And therefore, we have to rely on
I really
Sorry?
yeah. I like the bottom up approach, and I hope and I wish that greed is on its way out, but it doesn't seem to be. No matter COVID or no COVID, people have found ways to work with greed, even in these really traumatic, fearful, uncertain, ambiguous times as COVID. So I am as hopeful as you are on this aspect, and it's a very romantic statement in my view, but so it be. And I'm going to just ask you briefly to talk about it, and then I'm going to invite Jerry. Is the world now today, the world economy, the GDP, and all of that's happening right now, the tools, the modules, and the training, all the things that you've been talking about, does it fit the milieu of Indian farmer as we talk today? I've tried to, I want to ask you about this because it's a burning topic right now. And it's also something that is so close to the kind of work that you do.
So there is a legacy. When we started, there was nothing. There was no literature, there was no reference, there were no experiences, there were no protocols, how to go in and talk to people, how to do the facilitation, how to train. What is the theoretical basis? What is the methodological basis? What is the evidence? Can we actually prove what we claim communities do and how they function? Today, we are light years ahead of where we were in 1999, 2000, 2002, and 2008. I myself have published several books, as I said. There are others who have done a great deal of work on microinsurance, and this is ongoing. This is not just in India or just in the past. As we speak,
Right.
I co-edit a special issue of the Geneva Papers on Risk and Insurance on microinsurance, which I've been doing since 2014 on a regular basis. And we get more and more papers which are better and better and add a lot for the knowledge and the understanding, both of evidence and of theory. So that is the first aspect.
Right.
You cannot teach unless there is a basis from which one can teach. Today, there are universities, unfortunately not in India, but they will hopefully come, that have taken this material and have developed this into a master's program on micro health insurance. The health insurance is priority for them. And so the micro health insurance is a different theme from regular commercial health insurance, is already a topic for academic studying, both in Europe and at least in one place in Africa. I presume that it will not take very long before other universities, including in India, will prepare cadre to do that, and the material is today available. My own activities are that we still provide online and essentially worldwide in India and in elsewhere and through a website in the US, training on microinsurance, both for people who have just finished studying actuarial studies and anyone else who is interested, and one doesn't need to be an actuary to do it. So information is available through websites and through publications and through online access to documents. And I get requests virtually every week, which I am pleased to respond to. So there is a great deal more than there was then. Clearly, one also needs to have an institutional framework to do this. That institutional framework, which we created with the Microinsurance Academy, was indeed not short of demands. It was short of funders who were willing to fund the activity, because I refused to charge grassroots groups at the time anything for the services. So we needed to raise funding. We never raised a single rupee in India. We never got a single rupee from any source, public or private. So all the money came from outside. And
Right.
It's the worst part of my job as chairman was to have to fundraise. I don't like it, and it's tedious, and one has to do it, and we did it. But I was very pleased with the utilization of that money, because it allowed us to have a team, a large team, 200 people in the field, 60 people in Delhi in the center. We could actually
Right.
do work that has not been done anywhere else. Now, of course, that can be replicated, not only in one place in India, it can be replicated in many places, it can be replicated in other countries. And the way to replicate it is so much easier than to have to create everything from scratch without any model to follow and any tools available. Today, the tools are available, they're published, they're accessible, and there is even
Right.
a core team in India that would be able to do it much easier than it used to be. This is not as good as having a big academy with multiple branches, but the funding issue was the crux of it. And I suppose my age too. Because at one point in time, I
So
needed
on
to
this
come.
note, I'm going to, yeah. So I'm going to invite Jerry back into the conversation and take the conversation forward, and bring out some more insights. I'm going to bring out some more insights from our conversation.
Dr. Dror,
Hello, Jerry.
namaste once again.
Namaste. Nice to see
And
you.
greetings from India.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I've always liked your work, but we all also always been at loggerheads.
I didn't know that. I knew that you liked my work. I didn't know we were at loggerheads.
That I like your work is proven by the fact that you are featured in my book. But that we are loggerheads is about certain ideologies.
Tell me.
If you remember the first time I met you, I was criticizing the Indian government. And you said that's not the way to get it done. You worked with the UN, you worked with WHO. My first question to you is, do you think people besides you and people like you, do you think most people in the UN are really concerned this is my question. It's not a statement. Do you think they're really concerned about making a difference in the world, or are they just doing another job? I want an honest answer.
I think that there are very many people in the UN who enter the UN because it is a job, but with time develop an interest to make a difference. So it's not only a job, it's also an desire to make a difference. However, from the organizations that I know in the multilateral system,
Mhm.
I think the multilateral system suffers from very serious sclerosis, very serious lack of vision, how to actually make a change. You disappeared from my screen, so I don't know if you're still there, but
I'm very much here. I'm very much here.
okay.
Come back.
So I think that what we are talking about is something that is the need of not only the hour, but at least the decade, if not even the century.
Okay.
And both WHO and ILO and the World Bank and Asian Development Bank and the African Development Bank could and should do a great deal more than they have to promote, sustain, support, and expand the kind of work that we have been doing and which they should be interested in.
Very nice. I like that. I like what you're saying. And I guess that's the reason you're one of our Karmaveers, because you come from a very sensitive space. But here's something that I want to share with you about the UN and especially the WHO. I did a talk for them in 2016. It was an exotic resort called the Ayodhya or Ayodhya, like the
I know that. I know the
like
place.
yeah, it's exotic. I mean, every room is named after Ram or somebody who's related to Ram, right? And I did a talk over there for WHO leadership, like around 100 of their people, including the top brass.
Dr. Chan,
And
2016, you say, so it was still Dr. Chan.
yeah, I have no clue. I mean, I don't even want to remember their names. They're not worth my time.
Right.
I'm putting that on record straight. Uh, and I was told by the HROD people that they are getting uncomfortable because the theme of the talk given to me was how to build leadership with trust. Unfortunately for them, along with HR, I twisted the theme a little and I said how to build trust with humility and vulnerability, because those are my core values. HROD approved it, but now I'm explaining to them what humility and vulnerability means, and then it was getting to them. And at lunchtime, the HROD person, I can't name her surely because she'll get fired otherwise, he or she, let me clarify that. They clarified these guys are feeling huge discomfort because you're getting under their skin. Because in the office, even a person who's one level their junior can't cross them when they are crossing around in the office. This is what WHO is all about. What are your views on that?
I think that there are very many animals in every zoo. Not all of them are exactly the same. Not all have the same fodder, and not all produce the same kind of effects. So I would not want to put everybody in the same bucket for simplicity's sake.
But by far and large, if a HROD head is giving me this analysis, would you agree that there's a lot of egoism and egotism in the UN and the WHO and the World Bank circles, which helps them to not understand that they are there to serve the public rather than be there to live their jet setting life? I'm asking a very particular question and I want an answer to that.
When Mrs. Chopra interviewed me, I told her that when I worked in those organizations, I felt a tremendous distance between myself and everything real. That distance, that feeling of distance, I'm not alone to have felt, and I'm quite sure, knowing quite a number of people working in this system, that they feel this enormous distance, which comes with frustration. It doesn't come with ease. It doesn't come with pleasure. It comes with frustration, with a sense that you wonder what we are talking about here. Is that reality? Is anything real ever coming in here? Do we breathe air here? Can we open the window to get a bit of the outside world? And that is a risk that we all have when we escalate hierarchies. The higher we are in hierarchies, the more we are at the risk of losing our bearings. But in the international domain, in the multilateral domain, I told you, and I can only repeat, that I think we have a huge and ongoing, not a recent, but an ongoing problem with leadership. What does the leader of an organization need to be? On the one hand, they need to be an inspiring person. They need to be a philosopher. They need to be somebody with a vision. On the other hand, they have to be absolutely first-class administrators of a complex organization, which needs to deal with many, many countries, and each country has a minister who comes there and has their own point of view and their own special needs. And what I can tell you that in my years in the system, which were over 20 years, I have met virtually no philosophers and no first-class administrators. Administrators plenty, but first class, no, very difficult.
I
So,
love I love the way you have gone all around with the question. I simply love it. I just so love it.
so the task is a very difficult one. The first director of the ILO, who started the nomination in 1919 and was Director General until 1932 when he died, was called Albert Thomas, was a French socialist. In
Like
my,
I'm Jeronimo Almeida, Portuguese.
well, no, you are with Portuguese heritage, but you are who you are. Anyway, Albert Thomas was, in my view, a philosopher right for his time. He may not have been the best administrator, but he certainly was a philosopher. He had vision that took this organization in the early years and really made it what it was until the Second World War. Today in the system, we do not have that kind of leadership. The world has edged into seeing to it that the leaders of the international agencies are people who will never have an opinion with which you have to have a difference.
Right, sir.
And that trickles down in the entire system. There is
Right.
absolutely no way of assuming that with weak leadership, you can have strong, committed staff everywhere on topics. That's asking the impossible.
I'm virtually and literally called the devil's advocate, right? And I like what you're saying. And like I said, you and I have always been at loggerheads from. I remember I first met you at an award ceremony many years ago. I think it was 2012 or 13. I don't remember the exact year, but 12 or 13. And I was saying something on stage against the government and against the UN. And you said it's not all like that. I still appreciate the loyalty, but the point is, when you get co-opted in government or in the UN, you become this animal who is trying to safeguard her or his turf. What are your views on that?
What I like about the Karmavir and about what you have led, the beautiful ingenuity, is that it looks beyond the institutions and into what people do. I think this is the right focus. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things is your unique mantra, your unique label. And I think that even in government, there are ordinary people, even subservient people, who sometimes excel and do extraordinary things. And these are the ones
I must interject, sir. I must interject. That was not my question. My question was something else.
I understand your question. I think I understand your question, but I'm giving you my answer.
Right. I'm listening.
The issue is we all develop our unique way of bringing to bear something that we think is valuable.
Right.
What brought to bear ordinary people doing extraordinary things is something that inspired me, impressed me, and still does. And I hope this will take every possible form to get voice, because the more one hears about it, the more you will have ordinary people who are willing to do extraordinary things.
And that's what we hope to rise and raise. So, yeah.
On that one, kudos to you in every possible way. That the organizations and the administrations of very many bodies that supposedly are there to help or to serve the people are neither serving nor civil. So the civil servants who have stopped being civil and servants is a worldwide problem. But not a single person at the base of the pyramid or in a prison or in a village, and I don't compare, is helped by the critique of those who are not doing extraordinary things. All of us can help the people who don't get their fair share by flagging what ordinary people can do to help those people do extraordinary things individually and collectively. My focus is communities. What people can do in communities goes beyond anything that any one person can do. And this is the focus that I think if you were to give more voice to, you would be giving the best answer to what you have raised as a complaint in the form of a question.
Yes, sir. I agree with that and completely. And I always say it's better to light not just a candle, but to dispel the darkness. But also, it's very important to understand who is creating the darkness and address that. Because if we don't do that, they will create more darkness than the light.
That there is a great deal of unfairness, unnecessary unfairness, and inequality and injustice, we can agree. The causes for it are complex, multiple, and sometimes very context specific.
The causes for it are not complex. The causes for it are human greed, human atrocious need for power. And I don't understand that because...
Jerry, read the book. Please do.
I agree with you. But greed is not dead. Greed is deed. Today, greed is deed. I would change that with the E. Greed is deed.
I invite you to read this book. It just came out 2 weeks ago.
Sir, I will read your book. I love you and I will read your book. But what I'm trying to tell you is the world out there is not like you and me or Itu or anybody else. They are out there to further their agenda, promote their agenda, and they need a strong voice to punch start. That's it. I'm putting it straight on the table.
This is where Jeremy,
Everyone in the UN, everyone in the in. I mean, look at it. You have a rape of a Dalit girl happening, and you get it covered up. I'm sure you read the news. You know what is happening in India. So I'm not talking some nonsense over here. I'm talking pure. And the video Itu, Nishant, and all of us made today. It's taken us 1 week to make the video. It's gone out today because we want to tell people it's a matter of time before your daughter gets raped. Time you wake up. Time you don't wait for somebody to awaken you. And it doesn't matter where you work, whether you work in a Fortune 500 company or a UN, your daughter is as vulnerable as my daughter, period.
we agree. This is not a topic on which we have ever had disputes or arguments. You've never heard me say, well, if the rapist is a UN person, forget it. They are above the law. I didn't say that.
No. I'm not saying you said that.
And I think that some things that are happening are not a matter of an organization, are a matter of very sad and unacceptable situation. We agree. But the question is also what can one do to help people who are not in very extreme situations, in situations that don't hit a headline. Most people's lives don't hit a headline. You know, it's still true today. If a man bites a dog, it's a headline. If a dog bites a man, it's not a headline. We're talking about man hit a dog. And I'm talking to you about dog bit a man. I want to do something about that. That's my focus. Focus about making people's lives better in the context which is maybe unfortunate, is maybe unfair, is maybe in many other ways terrible, but still, is there something I can do with them together that their lives will be better for them, not for me, not for the government, not for the third party.
Dr. Dror, to conclude, I would say I love you, and just want to say one final statement that all of us are helpless right now in India. We live in a country called India, and I'm making this statement very strongly. We have a government which is completely rogue. We have a UN that is sleeping. We have a Trump who's sleeping with our government, and there are people being raped, and it's all being covered up. There are PR agencies being appointed to cover up the cover up. It's already covered up, but they want to cover up the cover up. And there's a huge UN presence in India, but nobody's doing anything about it. There's a huge NGO presence in India. They're not doing anything about it. Everybody is scared. If we end up like this, scared, this will be the end of humanity, and this will be the end of us all. I think people need to wake up to that. I'm going to conclude with that. Thank you so much for your presence. I loved my conversation with you, and I completely agree with you. I mean, I'm at loggerheads with you for ideological reasons, not for small reasons, but people need to wake up.
It was a pleasure to talk to you both. I'm glad we agree on so much, and I hope you will give voice to great, extraordinary things of ordinary people. And thank you again for making this conversation possible. I remind you not only of the story that is in your book, but also in the 2 books that I've published recently on the basis of India experience. And I really hope that somebody who wants to take it forward will not be shy. And if they want to contact me, they're absolutely welcome to do so.
I will talk to you about the books and what we can do with them tomorrow. I'll give you a call. Good night.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dror.
See you, Itu. I will look like Rahul Gandhi doing this, no, or Modi doing this, but that's not the intent. I'm just saying bye. Okay, good night. Adios.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, Dr. Dror. Thank you so much.